All right, so let's go ahead and launch. And so we're going to be live now. So everyone, you will be heard. So just please be quiet until.
They're just wrapping Blancpain now.
Okay, great. So let's go ahead and launch. Hello, everybody. We are just wrapping up our 12:30 panel. So we're going to be starting in just a couple minutes. At approximately 1:05 p.m., we will be beginning with dive watches. So thanks so much for joining us, and we'll be starting in just a couple minutes. Thank you.
I'm on.
Hi. So we have you, the reservoir.
I'm sorry. What?
Welcome everybody who's joined. We'll be starting the webinar in just a couple minutes.
Hello, everyone. Good evening or good afternoon, depending on where you're logging into. We are now heading over to dive watches, perhaps one of the most popular categories in the watch industry, maybe not the most complicated or the most refined when it comes to complications and movements, but nevertheless, one of the most popular categories we have in the watch industry. A category that also has had, in more than one case, actually had a huge impact on various brand success stories. And I am particularly happy that we have three very different manufacturers of dive watches with us today, which means we will most likely have a very lively discussion. I am joined today by Thierry Chenou. He's the president and managing partner of Bucherer, Reservoir's official agent for the United States. We have Vijay Geronimo, CEO of North America from Oris. And we have, dialing in from Switzerland, Michele Starvaggi, Executive Vice President, Sales International from Carl F. Bucherer. We usually start these discussions and these presentations with a very simple question: what's on your wrist? And I thought I would probably put on this one for this presentation, and I thought it just looks hilarious. So I didn't, and I went with a much more traditional choice. But to my panel participants, first of all, welcome everyone. And I would suggest we go in alphabetical order, starting with Carl of Bucherer. Michele, what's on your wrist tonight?
Good evening from Switzerland. Well, tonight on my wrist, there is a Calef Bucherer Black Manta, and we'll hear more about this watch later on.
I think we would have to have the video. I'm no longer muted. So good. A little bit of technical glitches do belong to the whole thing. And heading over to VJ. VJ, what's on your wrist?
I have a different Carl. I have a Carl Bucherer Oris on my wrist. So
Oh,
back from 2016, bronze model.
Why can't I see you? Good. And last in line, Thierry, what's on your wrist?
Hello everyone. I always wear these days the Supercharged. The Supercharge is inspired by the instrument panels from the Jaguars in the 1940s.
So you're not wearing a diver, so shame on you. But we'll be talking about dive watches enough. So something that I think is always relevant to just discuss, especially knowing that you have very different backgrounds and very different approaches to designing dive watches or producing dive watches. What in your experience makes a great dive watch? And again, I am handing this over to Carl of Bucherer or Michele. What with your experience, with what you have put into the Scuba Tech, what makes a great dive watch?
Well, I think first and foremost, good dive watch needs to be a reliable instrument. A diver expects certain features from a dive watch, which is good readability, roughness, waterproofness, and so on. But then again, a dive watch is as well a watch which is very versatile. So independently from the technical aspects, there are as well aesthetic aspects which need to be taken into consideration. So it's a mix of the two.
And what about your experience, VJ?
I think it's very much that. I think it's about function, right? So how does it function? How does it work? You know, will it perform under the conditions that it's in? The aesthetic of how it looks, but I also think it's like, you know, how it makes a person feel. I mean, I think a dive watch to everyone is a personal thing, and how you use it and what you do, you know, really. But I think, you know, having the ability, whether you're a true diver and you actually dive with it, or you're, you know, a so-called desk diver that just has it on. I mean, I think it's a matter of just, you know, knowing that you have the confidence that it could be used for that function, whether you use it that way or not.
There are no desk divers. That's we all take them diving. And Carrie.
Well, I would say that the most important element is definitely reliability. When you're diving, you want to make sure that the watch is functioning correctly. And this, I don't know if you can see it right there.
We can partially see it with your virtual background. It occasionally disappears.
The Reservoir is such a technical instrument that is very clever at the same time, because usually when you're diving, you want to make sure that the watch indicates to you that it is functioning. And when you only have one hand, they resolve that issue with a very clever indicator on the dial. So it's a very technical product, and it's also fun to wear. I've tried it at the beach, and I'm not a professional diver, so I think that the maximum depth I've went was perhaps 5 meters.
Well, you know, in most cases, history tells us that many dive watches had more difficulties in shallow waters than in depth, because there wasn't enough pressure. So that's already 5 meters. But necessarily, with all the different approaches that you have, how or why do you think our dive watches or continue to be that popular and I would even say why our dive watches even more popular than ever, despite the fact that we do have dive computers nowadays. And I think this is also something that is very interesting as a comparison to the age of the smartwatch. Even though there is something that is on paper capable of delivering more, it's not a direct competitor or rival to what we do. And I think that's the great thing about dive watches. It actually proves that despite the existence of dive computers, the category is even more popular nowadays. Who wants to start? Let's go again with Michele from Borer.
Yeah. Well, I think here we have probably a situation like having a landline at home and doing all the communications with your mobile phone. Maybe there is a situation where the mobile network is gone, and then you're very happy to have a landline to communicate. So I think the dive watch probably it's a reliable backup to the computer.
That totally makes sense. And then heading over to Vijay from Auris.
Yeah, I would say the same exact thing. I would think that, you know, that even with a mechanical dive watch, even, you know, there's a computerized dive watch, there's a mechanical dive watch, there's a dive computer per se. I think, you know, having that fail safe, that's something on your wrist that is working, that's entirely mechanical. And I think that's certainly something why they're prevalent today as well. And I think maybe, you know, when you talk to some people that are, you know, professional divers or divers, or, you know, they like to have it on there for the, maybe there's some functionality or something they get from the watch or something that's pretty basic from the watch that they may not get from the computer kind of thing.
And maybe as an add-on, especially from the perspective of Oris, because you not only have one model, you actually have a whole category of dive watches that split into 3 different segments. So you have the Aquis, which is your everyday dive watch. You have the 65, which is more the vintage appeal, and then you have the professional range with helium escape valves, et cetera, et cetera. So
Correct.
that appears to be a substantial part of your business.
Definitely. And it's something that, you know, and that's it. There's a watch for everybody and how it's being used and how they would approach it. You know, and obviously things that go into a professional dive watch at 1,000-meter water resistant are a little more in depth than the things that go in at 300-meter water resistant, et cetera. So.
And Thierry, you represent Reservoir with currently 1 model in different executions. Nevertheless, that model has already won 2 nominations at the Grand Prix. In your perspective, what's the success story behind that?
Well, you know, Reservoir is a concept a little bit unique because there's only one indicator. It's retrograde minute and jumping hour. So to transpose this concept into a diving watch is quite tricky. Why? Because if you have to stay 15 minutes underwater for the decompression stage, and the retrograde minute hand is past 45 minutes, obviously when it jumps back to 0, you need to be able to continue to monitor the time that you spend in that decompression stage. So the way, again, they have resolved this is quite unique in the world of diving watches, because it's an extremely professional watch with helium valve and all the technicalities. Extremely great legibility with the dial. You mentioned you have 3 different finishes. One is basically mimicking the air gauge. When you are diving and you have the oxygen equipment, you have this gauge that is a manometer that indicates the reserve of oxygen. And the concept of Reservoir is always to mimic, to take its inspiration from a real instrument panel, whether it's a cockpit altimeter, whether it's a GT car. But in the case of a diving watch, they took the inspiration from that instrument, which every diver has. So to answer your point, there's it's an aspirational watch for many people, including myself. As I said, I'm not a professional diver, but any professional diver, like my colleagues rightly said, I think it's very important to have also a backup instrumentation. Whether you're an astronaut or a diver, professional diver, you need to have this backup instrument.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And the funny thing is, I actually do see there is a surprisingly large number of people that both dive and collect watches. So the intersection of these two groups, which is really beyond the world of desk diving, fortunately, but occasionally I am too a desk diver. We all are when we have our regular jobs. There really is a growing interest among divers to connect these two worlds. And as there are collectors of vintage dive gears, there are collectors of vintage watches. So these two worlds coexist quite nicely. In case of Call of Bucherer, Michele, your Scuba Tech, I think, was launched in 2015. And you have pretty much focused on that model, starting in stainless steel and then slowly expanding into titanium. That's the last version, if I'm not mistaken. So the Scuba Tech Black is titanium. What was the reason to change from steel to titanium?
Well, we have launched actually our Scuba Tech line in 2013.
Okay.
And when we launch it at the very beginning, we'll see it later in the presentation. We have started with steel, and then we start to play with red gold and steel, and have added, I think it's back in 2018 with the Black Manta, the titanium case with the DLC coating. So basically what we try to do is here to have a cohesive line of products. We don't want to change the design of the product because we think in our eyes for KF Bucherer is a pretty iconic product. But what we do is we play a little bit with the materials, with the designs, and with the colors. So that's what we have done in the past years to keep the line fresh, and that's what we continue to do.
And Oris, VJ, you had quite an amazing couple of days behind you with the launch of the new Caliber 400. And despite this not yet being incorporated with a new watch, and again, this is why I think this group is so great to have. We have Reservoir working with a module that's exclusively developed for the brand. We have Call of Bucherer highlighting case construction and working with a reliable base movement. And now Oris is stepping into the world of 100% in-house movements. For us fans of the brands, collectors, do we need to be scared of the impact of what an in-house movement might bring to the price point of Oris?
No, I don't think we need to be scared, because I think, very much like Oris is, we always do things with that very price value relationship in mind. So, whether that's our, entry level price point all the way up to our most expensive piece, the price value always continues in the line. And I think when you see the Caliber 400 in, an actual watch, I think you'll find that it very much follows that same philosophy. And I think, our thing with product is always bringing a strong product to market at a reasonable and a responsible price, and that makes sense. And I think that's really what we've done. So I don't think we need to be scared. We will continue using sort of our base Swiss movements as part of the line, and then you'll see the Caliber 400 come into other things. But again, it's about innovation. It's continually innovating. It's continually, what does our consumer want? What do we, taking feedback, doing things like that. And I think that's what you get from our brand. A common sense approach to the issue at hand, and how do we approach it, and what do we bring to it. And
the warranty is?
On the new Caliber 400, the warranty is 10 years. Yes.
Wow. So again, congrats. This is a remarkable feature.
10-year warranty and 10-year service interval as well for the movement.
That's incredible. I would also like to tap into something that we see quite often when it comes to dive watches, which is conservation efforts. I think Thierry Reservoir works with a underwater photographer, and again, you represent a relatively young brand, while Call of Bucherer and Auris have been around a lot longer. And I would like to start with Bucherer again and their efforts in supporting the Manta Trust. Why mantas, and why do you think dive watches or luxury watches and conservation efforts are linked?
Well, Mantas, I go a little bit deeper than in my presentation of Bucherer, but I can give you a few reasons why for the Mantas. So back in 2015, we were looking for something where we could engage and really make a difference. And we found Manta Trust, and at Manta Trust, there is one gentleman, the founder and the CEO, which is Guy Stevens. And Guy Stevens is an advocate for the Mantas, but at the time he had very little funds to go deep into the research. And that was the reason why we engaged in it. We wanted to go somewhere where there was a lot to explore, where we could contribute substantially. And aside from this environmental angle of supporting the Manta Trust, there is as well another angle. If you have ever seen a manta floating in the seas, that's a very elegant dance, and the same elegance, that's what we see or we would like to express with our brand. So we have here a perfect match on the environmental side and as well on the brand content side.
Thank you, and I totally agree. I mean, seeing a manta ray on the water is a sight to behold of. Vijay, your company's list of projects that actually help protect the ocean, but not just the ocean in general, but water in general, is probably way too long for a 1-hour panel discussion. So maybe let's just focus on one, and also, why is Auris so committed to supporting this cause?
Yes, I think, I think if you look at it just in general, why we support the oceans, and obviously they're very essential to life for us as human beings, but we also believe in giving back to kind of the environment that we operate in. And obviously we make a lot of dive watches. We've made a lot of dive watches over the years, and we've been doing these projects for a long time. This is not something that we just came into because it's become in vogue to do it from a marketing perspective. It's something we've believed in as a company for a long time, and we continue to do these sort of things. And we're an independent brand. We're not, we're a relatively small company, but we have a global voice. And I think these projects are a way to really use our global voice to bring exposure to these different causes and what they're doing and the work they're doing, and especially the smaller organizations that may not have that global voice, or they're not an organization of a lot of bureaucracy. They're an organization of really small grassroots people, and that's how we approach it. And speaking of one of those organizations, one that we've been very fortunate to work with was the Coral Restoration Foundation in Key Largo, Florida, projects that's here in the United States. And they're an organization that really, from a grassroots, has taken the problem of the coral reefs in the Florida Keys, which is one of the 3 largest reef tracts in the world, and they've used their techniques to basically restore the coral reefs. And that's that's very basic, and we'll get into it a little bit, of growing coral on trees and actually outplanting, and it's very painstaking work, and it's very grassroots work, but they've done a lot that way. So we've been working with them. Our introduction from this year is our second watch with the Coral Restoration Foundation, actually 2 watches this year with them, but certainly something that we've done. So we like to find, in general, we like to find those organizations and really kind of use our voice to help them make a difference.
And I think that's quite often a misunderstanding among collectors or watch buyers in general, who ask the question, why are you doing that why do you need to get involved? I mean, we get it. This is not about doing something that makes sense or not, but why does it need to be a watch brand? And especially with looking at brands like Oris, with one of the biggest communities in social media, you can actually raise awareness that these organizations couldn't without you. So it's not just about giving money and supporting them. It really is about creating awareness. And same goes obviously also for Call of Bucherer. Thierry, do you know if Reservoir is considering going into a similar direction? Again, you're in a very different position. It's a young brand. It's an upstarting brand. You have one first dive model launched, and you have just introduced a cooperation with, I think, an underwater photographer. What is the brand getting out of it?
Greg Lecoeur is the photographer who is very renowned with the National Geographic and many publications. He dives and he documents the life under in the oceans. And as we all know, the oceans are being mistreated by man at the moment. So he raises the awareness with his incredible photography. And as with everything with Reservoir, it's a question of passion. And Reservoir's founder and CEO, François Moreau, is a man of passion. And the encounter that he had with this photographer in Marseille is worth telling the story. And I just see that François was able to join us. I saw that, I don't know if you have the ability to have François join us on the panel, because I see him.
He is here. He
Wonderful.
can
Maybe I should turn the floor to François, because he's the soul, he's the passion behind the Reservoir. He generates so much energy that even though I consider myself a big fan of the brand, there's no one better than François to talk about his creations. So maybe I should turn the floor to François.
Well, thank you, Thierry. I must say I'm a big fan of Thierry as well. You know, he's a good friend and a good partner for the North America market. So it's great. Yes, it's about. I mean, Reservoir is really a passionate story about passion, about measuring instruments and so forth. And when I met Greg, this guy was actually working in a factory of measuring instruments. That's an absolutely true story. And he was driving every morning to get to his factory in the south of France, looking at the sea. And he was telling himself, I want to become a photographer, underwater photographer. That's really my stuff. And one day he converted. He became a very talented underwater photographer. And we have similarities because I've been a banker for 25 years. And I was very, determined to change and to do watchmaking. And the day I switched, when I met Greg, we said we have this in common. And he's a really fascinating gentleman. He's finding some incredible findings in Antarctica, in South Africa, in Mexico, about the speed of deterioration of the oceans. It's quite scary, actually. So it's good to have a witness of that kind of massive issue we are facing.
Unfortunately, I do have to agree on this. So again, thank you, especially the three brands on this panel for every little bit that you're doing to help raise awareness and in some cases actually really actively support initiatives and people that devote their lives to protecting the oceans and water in general as a resource. So heading over to a little bit more of the product part, and I'd like to start with Call of Bucherer. If I'm not mistaken, the Scuba Tech Black is your headliner for this year. Michele, would you like to join?
Yes, the Scuba Tech Black is in fact the novelty which we have introduced this year, earlier this year, and it's actually here, and you can see it on the slide. And it's like the Black Manta titanium case with the DLC coating. It has a very dark dial with fish scales. The inlay of the strap, which you can see on the slide, and you can see it here, is made out of recycled plastic from the oceans. And as a little valuable side note, that was the watch which Sylvester Stallone wore in his last movie, Last Blood. So there were a lot of question marks what watch he was wearing. That's the watch he was wearing.
Brilliant. And I am heading over to, give me 1 second for the Auris presentation. Here we go. And now I do have to, is my screen being shared or not?
Not yet.
It is not, so give me 1 second.
No?
How about this?
We see it now, Roger.
We
Good,
see it,
perfect.
yeah.
So with Oris, as a quick introduction, you had a quite a busy year, and I think if I'm not mistaken, Vijay, and you correct me, you started with the gold Carrisford edition. You started with Lake Baikal, the blue Aquis, then you went over to the massive gold Carrisford, and then we had the Hangang edition in green.
Yeah.
And this actually, I think, is the third.
Yeah, so this is the steel version of the Carrisford Reef. So as I was talking about earlier with the Coral Restoration Foundation, this steel version is actually now the third watch. If you include the gold piece that we had done earlier, we did a 50-piece limited edition in gold. And when we think about, what we were talking about before with how we raise money and how we kind of go about it, Oris, we're not known for gold watches. It's not something we do. It's not something but we wanted to do something based on our experience with the organization last time that brought us something that was a very auctionable item that would help really raise a lot of money and funds for the organization. So we did a 50-piece limited edition of this particular watch in gold. So that's how we got there. So, and now we came out with the steel version back in June, and it commemorates the Carrisford Reef, which is the major project that the Coral Restoration Foundation has been working on for about 5 years. They've outplanted over 30,000 corals onto the reef using their techniques, using their coral tree techniques, and then harvesting them, and then actually basically sewing them back into the reef to regenerate the reef. So this piece is a 2,000-piece limited edition. It's in steel. It's an Aquis. It's based on our Aquis GMT. It comes in both steel and with an orange rubber strap. Like all of our Aquis pieces, it has the safety clasp on the rubber strap, so it has a spot where it will not release unless it's taken out. It has a micro adjustment clasp. This is a picture that Roger's showing of the actual coral reef tree. So these are PVC pipe trees that they use and actually plant in the nursery, the coral nursery. And then the pieces start on the very bottom. They start as very small pieces of coral, and as they grow bigger, they bring them up further and further to the tree. And then they basically harvest the coral, take it off the tree, and then they use that to go back into the reef and sew it. It's a very manual process, but their techniques they've become the leading organization throughout the world in terms of reef restoration and how it and the techniques to use it. So on the left, you'll see a picture of what the coral reef used to look like, and then on the right, you'll see some, after some short time and putting it back in, the regeneration that it grows. And it's really the coral restoration is really something that people should know about. It's because you think about it, what do I care about corals, or what do I care about a coral reef? But it's really something that really supports a lot of things in the ocean. The coral, the environment of the coral reef is really something that a lot of the species rely upon. And to see the degradation of over time, and to see kind of what's happening, what has happened, and organizations like Coral Restoration that do this work, it's really work that benefits the entire world, and they really need more organization. The picture you saw was them actually planting back in the reef, and then this is a picture of Carrisford from above. It's a pretty famous lighthouse, so that's what the watch is named after. And in a true Oris way, the steel piece is $2,800 on the rubber strap and $3,000 US on the bracelet. So we're excited about it.
Beautiful. And François, the bronze version of the Hydrosphere has just been nominated at the Grand Prix. what makes this version different than to the one from last year in stainless steel, except for the case material?
Well, I think the spirit is the same in sense that it is designed with the same concept, which is moving from a scuba diving manometer into a watch. So using the retrograde minute on 240 degrees, adding the jumping hour, putting on it a magnifier that makes the hour very easy to read under the water, and then putting this power reserve with all the design from scuba diving tanks and taps. The difference now is the bronze material, of course, which make it more vintage, more marine instrumentation, and also the fact that we with Revolution CEO Waco, we designed together the elements of the colors, and we decided to move to a sundial bronze dial, having the idea of just facing the sunset on the Maldives beach, having that kind of very warm light and with this brown color, and the result is quite pleasing, I must say, and I'm very proud and very happy that it has been pre-selected for the Grand Prix de Genève. It comes with another specificities. Our hydrosphere model doesn't have regular, lugs. This watch, because it looks like a manometer, has no lugs. The strap is screwed below the casing, and therefore, if we have a visual, that will be probably easier. And therefore, we decided with a way to have a NATO strap that goes with the bronze casing, and for that we needed. I don't know whether if we can move to the slides. But we decided you cannot screw, you can screw a bracelet, you can screw a rubber strap under the casing, but you can't screw NATO strap, obviously. So what we designed some stirrup that are being screwed below the casing that helps to pass the NATO strap within. And therefore the overall outlook is quite nice, very different. It's not common to see, dark brown dial for a diving watch, but I think it works very well. There's a lot of, again, vintage feeling with it. I don't know whether we can have, it's a bit further down.
Yeah, that was Thierry mentioned that in the introduction extensively. For me, one of the questions that I'm sure we will have later from the audience, because that's the obvious one, is especially for Oris and Reservoir, because Carl Bucherer doesn't have a bronze watch. What is the reasoning behind using bronze, especially for a diver? VJ, if you wanna jump in.
Sure. I mean, I think our first use of bronze was the watch I'm actually wearing, the Carl Bucherer, back in 2016. And I think the idea of it was it took inspiration from, the dive helmets of the day, the material that was used at that time. And that's kind of where it kind of first came into it as part of the introduction of that watch. But also, I think it's really a personal thing. I think it makes every watch the way that bronze patina is, the way that it kind of, you use it. It's really much about individuality too. It's about how you, what you do with your watch, and then it carries that with it. Mine happens to have a little bit of, green to it, a little bit of salt water that it's been to, or something like that. But everybody's different, and then the best part about it too is it can clean up very easily. It's the patina can be taken off and it can start again. So I think the use of bronze for us has been something about really allowing people to use their watch in the way they want it. And we don't really use a lot of gold, and it's kind of a unique way to do some two-tone things with us as well, and stuff like that. So that's how we've used it, and that's what's been good for us.
And again, what some of the people in the audience might not know, historically, bronze has quite a lot of advantages for a device that is permanently in salt water. which is one of the reasons why we don't see ship propellers made out of steel. Bronze traditionally used for diving helmets because there is patina, which is going to be which is adding a protective layer and not just green color to your skin. With Call of Bucherer, it's quite different. You are using titanium and steel. Are you considering going the bronze way as well? Michele.
Well, I don't want to disclose too much what it's in our pipeline, but it's clear that there has been in the last few years a trend to bronze watches, and maybe we come a little bit late, or maybe we don't come at all with bronze watches. Let's keep the question open.
Okay. Well, I'm trying to pull some of the novelties out of here.
Roger, I have a collector question, actually. Hi, everybody. He's asking, is gold introduced into the bronze alloy? Does anyone want to answer that?
You mean like a combination of bronze and gold as
I
a
think
new
that's
material?
what he means.
Okay.
Yes.
Not for us at Auris. We do not.
Yeah, neither for us.
I hope that answers the question. Definitely something that we haven't seen before. I mean, Oris was the first time we have gold with Call of Bucherer, and we have the first massive gold version of an Aquis had with Oris this year. All three of you use helium release valves in your watches. Although with Auris, it's a special segment which is called the professional divers, targeting a slightly different audience than with the Aquis. Do you actually have clients requesting helium release valves on your watches? And starting in alphabetical order again, once more with Michele, and then heading over to Vijay and François. Michele.
Well, we have touched before about the use in everyday life of dive watches, which is a little bit like SUV cars, which in all their life will never touch mud or go off-road. So for the same reason, most of the dive watches won't even see a bathtub. So we get very seldom requests for a helium valve. I would say that's a standard of performance for a good dive watch.
And handing over to Vijay.
Yeah, I would say, I think from people that use helium valves in a diving bell or whatever, they, as they descend and come back up again. I mean, I think as a professional diving tool for a professional diver, it's certainly something that is needed, or something that should be there. Again, it's not on everything because they're all not designed that way, but we certainly, from a functional perspective, if we're calling something a professional dive watch, we want to make sure it's a professional dive watch, and that's why we have a helium valve.
And François, you went both with a decompression bezel on your first dive watch as well as a helium release valve. What was the reasoning for adding this add-on?
Well, I think it's similar to my colleagues. I mean, it's a plus that is used by very few professionals, because take a diver watch, probably maybe 5 to 10% of people would regularly dive with their diving watch. How many percentage of the divers would go to decompression chamber? Probably 1%. So that's left with a few divers using the helium valve. But now, if you have one of these diver, you are very happy to have this valve actually. So it's a plus. It's a characteristic that makes it a professional diver watch. I think it's quite important. Same for the bezel. And as Thierry mentioned before, it was quite tricky to find a way to use a bezel with a 240 degrees retrograde minutes, because you have 120 degrees where it doesn't work anymore. So we had to invent this double graduation to make it work.
Well, speaking of inventions, this is still one of my favorite examples of what the hell were they thinking. At some point, a Swiss brand came up with a folding knife in a dive watch, which is, I still think, is up to this day one of the most ridiculous dive watches ever produced. But it's a nice combination of Victorinox knives and a diver. Just don't open the knife while wearing the watch. Speaking
Actually,
of wearing
Roger, I'd like to interrupt there because I have a collector in that vein asking if any of the panelists, including Roger, are divers? And if so, what's your favorite dive? And if it's not deep water, what's your favorite snorkeling location?
That actually would have been my next question because I would just
Oh,
have
we
been
must have
leading
ESP.
who was using a dive watch. But who wants to start? Let's go with Call of Bucherer first. Are you a diver, Michele?
I'm not a diver. To my best, I do snorkeling. The best snorkeling experience I had in and around the Seychelles Island. But the Call of Bucherer and Bucherer, as we are on the Lake of Lucerne, we have plenty of divers. Maybe they just take their diver watch to Bath. If we look at it more from a professional angle, Guy Stevens from Manta Trust, the CEO, and the whole team of Manta Trust, they all wear Scuba Tech watches. So these watches are day in, day out, 24/7, 365 days a year out in the seas around the world. So that's our ambassadors for the Scuba Tech. In fact, here on the right, you see Guy Stevens diving with Manta Race, and on the left, you have the team of Manta Trust.
Thank you. And you, François, are you a diver?
I'm a diver. Actually, I'm a real passionate about diving, and it started when I was early. One day, I don't know why, but I woke up at 14-year-old, and I asked my parents to take me to a scuba diving club to learn. And it was in Lyon, so there is no sea at a minimum of 4 hours driving. So it was just swimming in a swimming pool. But I don't know, it was a passion. And the guy told me, you are too young man, you need to come back when you are 16. So the day of my birthday at 16, I moved back to this club and I started to learn scuba diving. So I've been diving since then hundreds of times across the planet. I had the chance to travel quite a lot in my previous life. And as a little story to share, I almost died one day while diving in the Sainte, which is close to Guadeloupe Island in the French Caribbean. I don't go into the details, but I was out of air at 30 meters depth, which is not a best position to be in. And at that time, we didn't dive with equipment, like we didn't dive with jackets, we didn't dive with manometers. We just go down with a manual reserve on your mechanical reserve on your tank. So it's actually very dangerous, and we would not do that today. And at that day, when I came back, I swore to myself that I will never dive again without being properly equipped. And the first equipment is a scuba diving manometer. And since then, I've been diving quite a lot after that. And I always spend a lot of attention on my manometer to see how much air is left in my tank. And that's why I know all the design from all the manufacturers of scuba diving manometers, I think most of them. And therefore, when I designed this hydrosphere, I had in mind this Mares, this Scuba Pro, all this design that helped me a lot. And coming back to your collector question, my favorite dive, so I've done a lot of diving. I love wreck diving, it's fascinating. But the nicest dive ever I've done in my life are in Mexico, in cenotes. This is underwater, but in caves, how do you say, unsalted water. And it's the best lights I've ever seen in my life underwater, because you have some green and blue and shades, absolutely superb.
Thank you. And VJ, with all the dive watch launches Oris had in the past, now is the time. And before you answer, by the way, going back to the question, I don't know, quite a lot of people don't know that snorkeling is, if not more dangerous than diving, because you get a sunburn quite easily, you lose body heat quite fast because you're on the surface, you're not always wearing a wetsuit. So there is not a competition between snorkeling and diving. Quite often you have better equipment for diving, and people underestimate the dangers of snorkeling. Well, having said that, back to VJ.
I'm very dangerous. I'm not a diver, but I have snorkeled. Fortunately, I have the role I do with Oris, and I've been fortunate to see some really nice places around some of the projects that we've done. So some of the highlights, I would say, of a couple places that I have been. we did a project down in the Caymans with the Kittiwake, which was a sunken US ship that they had sunk. We had done a watch around that. So we were there. And then also the Carries Fort Reef, actually, I had the fortunate pleasure of being able to do that. And that was really amazing to see with a group of people wearing, it was the Staghorn watch at the time, and being able to go under with it and kind of see what was happening and witness the work that they were doing. I mean, and that was something that, I'll never forget. Oh, we lost you.
Roger, you need to unmute.
Just
and Roger,
realized.
since you're muted, you can't get out of answering this question yourself too.
Okay. The good thing is I already answered that in a previous discussion. It's probably the most disappointing answer I can give, because when I started diving, you pretty much know what to expect from all the movies we have seen in the past, from every book that we have seen. If you go to Egypt, if you go to the Bahamas, no matter where, you somehow know what to expect. And this doesn't make diving less interesting or less fascinating. But in my case, I had no clue how a boring lake in Switzerland would look like from beneath the surface. So for me, actually going into Lake Zurich was as thrilling as diving in the Bahamas or in Egypt or anywhere else. But I think for me, one of the most memorable dives was this January, when we ended up with a group of 3 dolphins interacting with us while on the water after having seen a hammerhead shark. And that's quite something different, because every diver who has been diving for more than a couple of years, you really see how the diversity on the water is declining, and comparing that to the movies from the 60s, from the 70s, where you pretty much could just jump into the water and you saw everything. It's getting quite frustrating to dive between these 15 and 30 meter range, where just everything is gone. And that's unfortunately the sad part of the whole story. I hope that was an answer that is okay. Someone in the chat said, I want that watch. I don't know which one. I really hope it's not the one with the knife I was just showing, because that doesn't work. That's dangerous.
I think that it was. And
Yeah, I think so.
I actually have another question from Roberto for everyone. What is the future of smart straps integrated into dive watches?
Ooh, that's a good one. Who wants to start? I'm giving you more time. We have, with Oris and Call of Bucherer, 2 brands that have started to work with recycled materials. Call of Bucherer is using recycled textile straps out of PET bottles, and Auris is doing so with a special material for their boxes. I'm not sure if Reservoir is actively working with stuff like that, but I've seen the Nata strap on the bronze hydrosphere. So handing that back to whoever wants to jump in first, smart straps.
If that's a reference to, the materials, we've certainly, as you mentioned, we've done a couple of things with the materials for the boxes, but also for, we've done a recycled ocean plastic fabric strap as well. We've done an algae box that's made of 30% algae to kind of reduce the plastics in that. We've done a lot of things around those things. And then we also made a PET box with our trilogy set last year. And even in the watch, we used some materials of PET. So we continue to innovate and continue to look for ways to kind of help that make sense, that really kind of keep us as something that can take something that's been recycled and make it beautiful again and put it into something like a watch. If you're referring to smart as opposed to like computer smart, like that's not something that we are we're pursuing at this time.
Anyone else?
Yeah, well, I can just repeat what my colleague from Oris said. If you're looking for smart technology in a Call of Bucherer, I think we are wrong, or we are the wrong brand, as we rely to our past and our history and to our heritage. Whereas when it comes to material, we just started with this recycled plastic material in our straps, and we are exploring for more and more in a credible way, because today in different industries you have so-called greenwashing. So because it's trendy, people try to paint themselves a little bit green, and I think the mature consumer of today, he finds out very, very fast if you're doing that, and turns away from the brand. So it's very important for us to explore in a very solid way manner what materials, reusable materials, we can integrate in our watches, but in a very credible way.
And before I hand over to François, I think the smartness when it comes to dive watches, in particular the mechanical ones, I think it's a smart choice to buy one, but I don't think that you will see anywhere soon a producer of mechanical dive watches adding this. We had that in the past when smaller brands added compasses or additional stuff to strap, but that never really took on and was ultimately replaced by the dive computer. But Reservoir, any plans?
On smart strap, in the sense of connected strap, I mean, we are not exploring actively, but we remain open to how the market is evolving. But you're right, Roger. There have been some attempts a few years ago, like from Montblanc, if I recall, and from IWC, for instance, having some smart strap not talking, but connected to the computer while being put on the watch. So we are exploring. I'm hearing there are some very interesting progress that are being made, particularly on the health side. About the blood oxygen, all the sensors that makes you can detect some potential heart attack in a very advanced stage. That's quite promising. So I'm keeping an open eye on that, and actually we have some discussion on that. Regarding the recycler, which is not exactly the same question, but we have not launched our recycled strap yet. And I cannot unfortunately say more because it's still being not more than developed. It's being prototyped, and as it's very unique, I cannot share it for now. But it's recycled from the world of scuba diving, and I agree also that the future also comes through straps. There are a lot of things that could be done with straps, recycled or not. We just launched last week a new strap made with rooster feather, for instance. It's rooster feathers that makes a strap which is quite unique. And so we are also actively exploring what a strap could mean in the future.
And we have received a question from Michele, who has sent in a written question for VJ. Obviously mentioning the Caliber 400 was a mistake on my behalf, sorry, because now everyone is waiting for that. Do you want to share any outlook on when there might be something around the movement that can be purchased by watch collectors?
Yeah, I mean, I would say in the near future. I would say, I would say you won't have to wait too long for that. And if you, on the subject of Caliber 400, in tomorrow's discussion, we'll be speaking much more in depth about that tomorrow morning when we do an actual Oris session on that. So
that's tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. everyone.
If you'd like to learn more about that, yes.
And I think Minda has two more questions.
Yes, I have a question that was sent in for Carl F. Bucherer. And it says, among the more popular modes from CFB, it seems the vintage-inspired chronographs have hit a particular chord in the watch world, notably the Monero Flyback and the Heritage Bi-Compact Annual. Are there any vintage CFB divers that might exist that the brand is thinking of for a reissue or re-inspired piece? I don't know if you can answer that, but that was my question.
The iconic divers from the 60s and from the 70s are the so-called Archimedes from Carl F. Bucherer, which had a compressor, or one was a compressor and the other one was a super compressor. And our heritage line goes back in history, takes iconic models and represents them in a new temporary fashion. So I don't exclude that we might dig in our treasure box one day and come up with a remake of these models.
Thank you. And the other one, Minda?
Yes, I actually have one for each brand. So this is for Oris. Oris is often cited as a value-driven brand by many consumers, especially younger. With that being said, has Oris seen younger buyers as a key demographic? And if so, why do they think that is?
I think, I think we've been very fortunate to always have a place with the watch community. I think over time, Oris we've been around for 116 years. It's a brand that a lot of people knew. A lot of times you'll hear someone say, for many years, you'll hear people say, it was my first watch, it was my first mechanical watch, the price point was good, that sort of thing. I think what's happened is now with the advent of social media and the advent of, before, if you were a watch collector, 15 years ago, you read WatchTime, you saw something there, you kind of maybe thought in a group in that sense. But now with social media, all the watch collectors have a voice, and I think it gears younger. So I think people on it, and we've been fortunate to have a community of people that have really enjoyed the brand and have the ability to kind of talk about it on social media. So I think it certainly has brought us a younger consumer to that extent. But I think also just our positioning, or not our positioning, but just our place as sort of this entry-level quality Swiss mechanical watch brand. I mean, I think that also lends to that.
Cool. And you have the Oris bear with you.
And we have the Oris bear. He's here.
So people are asking about the Oris bear. Yes.
They always do.
Yes. And so I have just one more question. This one is for François, and this is more of a personal question. What was your first watch, and where did your passion for watchmaking come from?
My first watch was, I swear to God, it's a true story, you won't believe it, but I was 5-year-old. I was going to primary school with my dad. My dad was buying some cigarettes. At that time, everybody was smoking. And I was watching in the showcase of the tobacco shop, a plastic watch. This very cheap for children. And I bought it, and I just made me a little scars with it because I just cut myself. And I kept that since then. My first serious watch was a Seiko diving watch. Seiko is not necessarily seen as prestigious, but it was a very reliable watch. And my first watch was a first luxury watch, was an Explorer from Rolex.
That's always a good choice. Well, I think, do we have more questions coming in?
I think that we have gone through them. If anybody has any last minute questions or wants to put something in the chat, but I think we've caught up.
Perfect. Otherwise, thank you so much for the participating brands, Auris, Bucherer, and our newcomer Reservoir. You have been a fantastic panel. You have each and all brought in something very unique to the world of dive watches and watchmaking in particular. I, from a diver's point of view, want to thank and encourage all of you to support conservation efforts when it comes to the oceans. We can't do too much to help preserve water and the biosphere on the water. So thank you for that. Thank you for launching amazing new products, starting with the Bucherer Scuba Tech Black, which is the first time in titanium with DLC, which I think is a fantastic offering. Auris have had an amazing run so far. I thought that the Baikal edition was by far one of the nicest Auris Aquas I have ever seen, but then came the Green Hung Hung edition, and maybe there is more to come. And with Reservoir, I think every time I think that we have seen enough bronze watches, there is another one that proves me wrong. So, and especially looking at the upcoming Grand Prix, fingers crossed for yet another nomination there. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for the audience for the questions.
Thank you.
Roger, before we finish, can I say one small word on behalf of everybody?
Yes, please.
Okay, last year about this time, I was in New York City at WatchTime, meeting and engaging with consumers one-to-one. It was a treat. It was very nice. I hope to be there this year as well at WatchTime New York. It's not the case. So let's hope that in 2021, we all meet again in Gotham Hall in downtown New York. Until then, to the future.
Thank you. I don't
I
have.
love that. Yes, we miss you all very much. Thank you.
You too.
Thanks, everyone, and talk to you soon. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Bye.